Welcome to Literary Libations with Librarians in October, which is always a fabulous month for those of us who love the spooky season. Not all our books will be spooky today, but as we talk about them, if there's a title that you're really interested in and you'd like to get your hands on it, there's several ways to go about doing that. The first and probably the easiest is to just call your local branch of the Monroe County Library System and speak to the staff there, and we'll be more than happy to assist you. If you see a title that's available in a physical version, a hardcover, or an audiobook on CD, you can request those through our catalog that's online, and that web address is on your screen now. Some of the books you'll see are available through one of our digital apps, and those are Libby and Hoopla, and you should check those out. If you have a device and you want to listen to books or you want to read magazines, they're pretty amazing and they cost you nothing. But if you see that a title is available through those, you just download the app and search for it on there and you can get it. An extra special bonus with Hoopla is that there's never a wait for the titles there. If you see the lightning bolt next to it, and 99.9% of the titles have the lightning bolt. So make sure to check those out. I am Jennifer Graneski, and I'm the Dundee Area Supervisor. And we are actually recording this on Friday the 13th in October. So it seems like our introductory question would have something to do with, superstitions or spooky things, but no, I went with the fact that October, I don't know why they chose October, but October is National Pizza Month. And so our introductory question is, what's your favorite kind of pizza? And I have two. So first of all, I love a deep dish Chicago style pizza. And it doesn't really matter what you put on it, because it's got that buttery, thick, bready crust and cheese. What more do you need? You put whatever is on there. Not pineapple. I'm not a pineapple girl. If you're a ham pineapple person, but any meats, any veggies, I'll go for that. And then my second favorite, shout out to the Britain gas station just outside of Dundee. And I know you're thinking gas station pizza, heat lamps and everything. No, Britain gas station makes amazing pizza oven pizzas. They have great crust. My personal favorite is pretty much their bacon with whatever. Usually we try and get a vegetable and pretend it's healthy, because you got a vegetable in there. So shout out to the Britain gas station. If you're ever driving through Britain and you need some pizza, give it a try. It's really good. So those are my two favorite types of pizza. Also with us this time is Marcia Langendorfer, who works in the Ellis reference section. And what's your favorite kind of pizza, Marcia?
Well, unfortunately, I've never met a pizza I didn't love, so I'm not picky. I will take pineapple. I don't care what's on it. I will back clean up and eat any pizza. And I also love deep dish. When you said that, I didn't even think of that. But I will say our go-to pizza is also a local little establishment. We always order the barbecue chicken pizza from Pearly Park Campground. So if you are again near Petersburg, they're open year-round. So if you camp in the summer, it's great. They have a swimming pond. It's so fun. It's just down the road from me. So a lot of nights it's like, do you just want a barbecue chicken pizza? And the answer is yes, we do. So Pearly Park barbecue chicken pizza.
Nice.
You won't regret it.
I've not tried that. Also with us is Jessica Otto, our head of collections. And what's your favorite pizza, Jessica?
My favorite pizza is the Detroit style pizza. It doesn't necessarily have to come from any specific establishment or restaurant. I just love the pizza, like the square or the rectangle, and it's got like that good crust along the sides, on both sides. That is absolutely my favorite type of pizza. I could never ever turn that down if it's in the room. It's pretty much my kryptonite. So yep. Detroit style pizza.
Now we know what to bring Jessica when it's potluck at work.
Yes, just bring me some Detroit style pizza. It's all good.
And also with us this week is Mandy Draganik, who is one of our catalogers for the library system. And what's your favorite type of pizza, Mandy?
I'm a little bit like Marcia, and there's not very many I would ever turn down. But I have like this really big love for a deep dish with the good crusty corners. But I also sometimes really love a thin, crispy crust. So I mean, just, yeah, all the pizza.
All the pizza, all the time.
All the
I
time.
also will do a lovely fruit pizza. You know, if anybody's had those with the cookie crust and, I don't know, frosting, cream cheese thing and all the little fruits, that's excellent too. And look, fruit and pizza. So I will eat fruit on pizza, just not pineapple. So, and now to go to our books. And I am going to ask Marcia to kick us off with some of her favorite books that she's been reading lately.
Sure. So these are just two of my most recent ones. I always have a hard time narrowing these down, but I actually listened to both of these on Hoopla, which you were just talking about. I love them. I love them on my commute. I also love to, you can adjust the speed or you can do different things. I've mentioned that before, but these also had really good readers, which I enjoyed. But the first one I'm going to talk about is Finders Keepers. And this story is really great because this is a story that gets published and it's called The Diary of an Octopus. And this story comes out and it is published and it is written like a diary, like a journal. And it's all about this girl and her relationship with a teacher. And then there is a murder involved. And it's very, very detailed specific. Only this girl who picks it up and reads this book realizes it's her story. She had a diary on a laptop that she lost 2 years ago that was then found and published. So she's paranoid that someone's going to find out this stuff in her past because it's all laid out there. And she's not even the one who wrote the book. So there's all these twists and turns because she's trying to recover the diary and there's some secrets with the real author. And it's just really, it's Finders Keepers. So it's really all about this story that gets misplaced, brought back, and then some, some murder and some different discourse throughout the book. So it was a really gripping, good read. I was kind of trying to figure out what really happened. And so I enjoy that. I kind of like when I'm suspecting different people at every turn because then I think, oh, now they're the guilty ones. And my second book is very similar. I clearly have a genre. And a lot of times when you're on Hoopla, they will say, oh, you might like, and I think, well, don't mind if I do. So they'll recommend your next read for you and it's just a click away, right? So you read this one and they think, well, you're warped and twisted, try this one. And so I pick it. And so my second one was very similar too. So this one's called The Perfect Marriage, only perfect has the line through it because it's not such a perfect marriage. And this is the story, I'm glancing because I kind of forgot their names, but Sarah Morgan, she's like this really hotshot attorney. She's become partner and she has got it all together and she's just like a force to reckon with. And then her husband is kind of a struggling writer, just kind of in a rut. So they buy this lake house so that he can get inspired to write. Only he is inspired to begin an affair with someone at their lake house a couple hours away. So he spends time with this other girl while his wife's out there killing it. And speaking of killing it, his mistress winds up dead in their lake house. So his wife defends him as the attorney, even though, yes, right, already shaking your head. So the whole time you are wondering, like, what is going on? You don't know who to trust. It turns out that his girlfriend also had a husband and had some past to her. So all of a sudden you're just, and her husband turns out that, he has connections to the town. I don't want to give too much away, but the whole time you're suspecting everyone and you don't know who's lying. And you're really just trying to figure out what's going to happen. So I thought both of these books kept me guessing. I like when I don't initially know who is the killer or what's going on. So I enjoyed both of them. If you like a good suspense, I would recommend both of these books.
Excellent. Thank you, Marcia. And I do love hey, why don't you try this feature? That's always lovely because, sometimes you don't know what you want, even though I have over 75 books on my to-read list on Goodreads, and I should pick one of those. But look, this one sounds amazing. I need to do this one. So thank you. And let's have Jessica share what she's been reading lately.
Okay, well, I'm gonna try to stay on season here today and have two of my spooky picks. So we all know that October is the month for spooky chills and thrills, but it is also National Cookbook Month. Why not combine both of those things and check out a copy of my first title, The Horror Movie Night Cookbook, 60 Deliciously Deadly Recipes inspired by iconic slashers, zombie films, psychological thrillers, sci-fi spooks, and more by Richard S. Sargent. If you're not familiar with the author, he is an award-winning actor, director, producer, playwright, and filmmaker, and of course, a fan of horror films. So in the introduction, he explains that the idea for this cookbook came about when he learned that some of his friends knew very little about the horror genre in films. And so as a fan of horror, he took it upon himself to introduce his friends to some of the classic and essential horror films from across the decades. And he did this by hosting horror movie nights in which they would watch 3 horror films each night that were all tied together by some common theme. And of course, if you're hosting a movie night, you have to have some good grub. So the author, who is also a fan of creative cooking, decided to use the movie nights to create new recipes inspired by the content of the films they were watching. So the author put together the recipes he created from 30 different films over 10 movie nights to give us this killer cookbook, which is perfect for fans of spooky season and movie buffs alike. The book contains frightening, delicious food and cocktail creations inspired by classic scary movies like Jaws, Psycho, Scream, and Halloween. The book is divided into sections such as finger foods, dinner is served, and sweet tooth. There are such varied recipes as the poltergeist-inspired crawling steak, the Night of the Living Dead-inspired burial plot, which is a crushed Oreo dessert, and of course the bug-inspired flypaper lemon bars with chocolate chip bugs. So each recipe starts out with a brief statement on how the recipe connects to that specific film, whether it be a recipe that is inspired by a particular scene or a particular bit of dialogue from the film, such as there's an eye in meat pie recipe inspired by Shaun of the Dead. Or perhaps recipes could also be inspired by how the film was created. So for example, there is an Evil Dead inspired zombie guts cookies recipe, which calls for cream corn because, they were on slightly a lower budget when they made the Evil Dead. And so because of that, most of the gore effects in that film were actually created using milk, corn syrup, and cream corn. Who knew? Each recipe also lists the prep time, the cook time, and it also lists a kill level of either easy, moderate, or hard. So if you're looking to slay your next movie night, or you're just looking for some fun horror film inspired recipes for a dinner party, or maybe even on Halloween night, look no further than the Horror Movie Night Cookbook. I also recommend this to fans of the horror film genre, even if you aren't into cookbooks or really into cooking. It was very fun for me to see the creative ways that the author uses food to pay homage to some of the great films of the horror genre. So go ahead and check it out. To quote one of the films featured in the book, what are you waiting for? So my second title, also sticking with my spooky spine chiller theme, is by one of my all-time favorite authors, R.L. Stine. So growing up, I was a huge fan of Stine's Goosebump and Fear Street series. They never failed to give me a good scare. And I recently became aware that Stine actually wrote some novels specifically for an adult audience, in addition to his numerous works for children and young adults. So when I was searching for a good spooky spine chiller to read this month, I decided on Stine's 2012 novel, Red Rain, which is described as an homage to the millions of adult fans who grew up reading his classic series, and a must-read for every fan of deviously inventive chillers. So our story starts out with adventure travel blogger Leah Sutter traveling to a remote island located off the coast of South Carolina called Cape Le Chat Noir. The island is known as being mysterious, frightening, and some would even say haunted. The island's bad reputation started back in the 1600s when dozens of Spanish ships mysteriously sank off the coast of the island. And then over the years came rumors of dark magic rituals and just some spooky and supernatural happenings. And for this reason, the tourists generally avoid Cape Le Chat Noir, despite its close proximity to both the Outer Banks and Cape Hatteras. So tourists avoid it except for Leah Sutter, she's skeptical of these islands' frightening stories, and she's curious to experience the life on the island firsthand and to get to the bottom of these rumors and share the truth with her readers. So when Leah arrives on the island, the taxi that's supposed to take her to her hotel is running late. So she decides to wait in a local tea shop, and she shares a cup of tea with the owner, Marguerite. Now, Leah has not exactly chosen the best time to visit the island because there is a powerful hurricane. Hurricane Ernesto is churning out in the Atlantic heading toward the island. And while she's having this cup of tea with Marguerite, who has been a lifelong resident of the island, shares stories with Leah about the last time a major hurricane hit the island, which was all the way back in 1935 when Marguerite was just a child at the time, but she remembers the storm just basically flattening everything in its path, and there was nothing left standing on the island once the storm had passed. But Marguerite tells Leah that despite the immense devastation, that it only took a few weeks for the island to recover because the dead from centuries past rose from their graves to help rebuild the island. Now, being a skeptic, Leah does not believe that part of the story, but before she can talk more with Marguerite about this, her taxi arrives and she's whisked off to her hotel. So Leah eventually meets up with a local woman named Martha Swan, who Leah connected with over social media prior to her trip to the island, and she ends up attending a local ceremony called a revenir ritual, which is part of a local practice called main magique, which means hand magic or magic hands. So Leah, she witnesses something at this ritual that makes her believe that perhaps Martha's story about the dead rising from the grave may not be so far-fetched after all. But before Leah has a chance to process what she has seen, Hurricane Ernesto suddenly descends upon the island, and Leah is forced to take shelter at Martha's house, which is supposedly the strongest house on the island. So after the hurricane passes, Leah leaves Martha's house to survey the damage. She just cannot believe the devastation from the storm. Businesses and houses are flattened, numerous lives have been lost, and as she walks the island, Leah begins to feel the pitter, pitter, patter of raindrops on her skin. And when she goes to wipe off the rain, she realizes this is no ordinary rain. This is red rain, as if the sky is raining blood. Leah looks up to see sheets of the red rain falling ahead of her, and from the red rain emerges two figures, two young boys, identical twins. The boys tell Leah their parents were killed in the storm and their house was washed out to sea. They claim they have no other living relatives and no place to go. And feeling sorry for them, Leah takes the boys, Daniel and Samuel, into her care until she can get them the help that they need. So after taking care of the boys for a few days, Leah feels a strong connection to them. She almost feels as if she needs them in her life. So when Leah is finally able to get in touch with her husband, who is a child psychologist and a best-selling author of parenting books, she begs him to let her bring the boys home with her. Now, her husband, Mark, is really reluctant about Leah bringing two strange young boys back to their house in Sag Harbor. New York. He's like, I know you're there. You've gone through a really traumatic time. You formed this connection, but we don't know anything about these kids. And besides, really, we should contact the authorities and make this, maybe they can look into this, find out if they have family, and maybe we can adopt them later if no family really does exist. But Leah's insistent. She's going to bring these boys home. So Mark hesitatingly agrees to allow her to bring the boys to their home just until the authorities on the island can find whatever paperwork they have about these boys and figure out, maybe they have some family out there. So Leah returns home with the boys, where at first everything seems to go just fine. The boys are amiable and they're grateful, and they seem to try to settle into their new home and into their new family. But then things start to happen, including a series of brutal murders, and all the evidence points to Mark. So is Mark really responsible for these heinous crimes? Or maybe is it just possible that the twin boys are not at all what they seem? So I really enjoyed this book. This was just some wonderful escapism fun for me to read this. And I actually read numerous reviews that said that they felt the ending of this was really predictable. I didn't see it coming at all. I didn't find it predictable. So maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just really bad at predicting book endings. I don't know. But I highly recommend this book to fans of R.L. Stine, especially if you're like me and you grew up reading his J and YA series. I think you will enjoy this. I also recommend it to horror fans in general, especially if you're a fan of horror books with scary children and specifically scary twin siblings. I think you will enjoy this book that Library Journal called a creepy fun read.
Thank you, Jessica. As soon as you said twins, I'm like, don't you just want to be able to tell the characters, like, do you know you're in a horror novel?
Yeah.
So good.
Did you see The Shining?
No, this is not going to turn out well. Like make a different choice. Instead of hiding behind the chainsaws, go to the car with the keys in it that's running. That's a better choice. Oh my goodness. But that just makes me laugh. It sounds fabulous though, and we all have fond memories of R.L. Stine. I guess I didn't realize that he was doing adult fiction.
Apparently he's written 4 works of adult fiction. Okay. And in fact, in his acknowledgments at the end, he thanked his publisher, I believe it was, he said, for convincing him to dabble in adult fiction and take a little bit away from his day job of scaring children. So that's what.
Thanks, R.L. Stine. Scares for all ages.
Yes, yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Jessica. And let's have Mandy share what she's been reading.
So mine aren't what I would call regular spooky books, but I'm still saying, yeah, they're spooky. So I've got Hitchcock, and I actually even have it here because I have not finished reading it yet. It's Hitchcock's Blondes, and the creepiest things to me are the creepy things in real life, right? And apparently there's a little creepiness happen with Hitchcock and all of his leading ladies. It's a little bit of a biography about him, a little biography about all of these ladies, and a lot of stories about filming the movies themselves. So if you're interested in his movies, you'll still find this amusing and entertaining, I think. The author speaks specifically of June Howard Tripp, Madeline Carroll, Ingrid Bergman, Grace Kelly, Janet Leigh, Kim Novak, Eva Marie Saint, and Tippi Hedren. Can I say first the story about Tippi Hedren and what they did to her with the birds filming that movie? I never thought the birds was scary, but what they did to her filming it, totally scary and creepy and should never have happened. Anyway, there's a lot of little tidbits, a lot of juicy tidbits. You could skip over those if you'd like. Just kind of a fascinating read about one of America's favorite horror film directors. My other book is one that I have been incredibly fascinated with. It's called The Year of No Garbage, and it's by Eve Schwab. She's also done The Year of No Sugar. I think this is her 4th similar book. And she decided one year wouldn't it be fantastic if our whole family stopped throwing things away? Just stopped. We're going to recycle everything. We're going to reduce, reuse, recycle. And she got her family on board somehow, and they all decided, yeah, we're going to do this for a whole year. And then she realized how hard it was going to be. How hard it was going to be to get groceries home that don't come wrapped in plastic. How hard it was going to be to buy toothpaste that is good for the environment. And then to make matters worse, COVID happened. So now they kind of have to throw some of the rules out the window because, you know, you can only buy what you can buy. But she still does her very best. And there really are scary parts to this. She talks about the way single stream recycling actually works, and it does not work the way most of us think it does. She talks about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, but really there's 5 of those, and they now encompass more space, more surface space in the oceans than actual land. And that's like really creepy and scary. But it's a fascinating read, and it makes you just kind of think about, what are you doing in your own house? She says the first moment that it really occurred to her was she was walking through her living room and there was a rock that had been tracked in on someone's shoe. And she picked it up and walked to the garbage can, or where her garbage can had been. And so why would I throw this away? It's a rock. Just toss it out the front door where it came from. So it really is kind of eye-opening about what are we doing with all of our stuff. So that's my other scary, not scary story.
I had a patron return that here, and she's like, I have a little time left, like you should read it. And I could not put it down because it's unbelievable. And I mean, and it makes sense. I mean, think of all the people in the world. Where is that garbage going? Think about how much garbage you as one person makes. But it was crazy. And like you said, scary and sickening. And I mean, obtusely obvious, right? But not so obvious. So yeah.
She also discusses some things that people have a lot of questions about, some personal hygiene things that maybe you don't want to try everything that's available out there. She gives you a little bit of insight on her thoughts and her experiences.
Excellent. Thank you, Mandy. Yeah, that's definitely one of those things where you just don't think about it until you see it in the news or something, and then you're like, oh, I should do better. Challenging and scary. So thank you. My 2 titles, the first one is The Skull by John Klassen. And this is actually a children's book. And I love John Klassen. And I do not remember how I was first introduced to him, but I remember what it was that made me just fall in love with his very dry sense of humor, his dark sense of humor, and his very direct way of telling stories. And what it was is, I don't know if there was a competition or if this appeared in a book, but it was an attempt to tell the shortest horror story possible. And so this was John Klassen's attempt to tell the shortest horror story possible. And if you happen to be listening instead of watching, I'll try and describe it as briefly as possible because it's supposed to be short. So it is 1 page, a black and white drawing of a house. The title is The Legend of Alexandra and Rose by John Klassen. And then he labels different parts of the picture. And picture number 1 is Alexandra's room with the small window. And you see the small window at the top of the house that Alexandra has. Number 2 is Rose's room with the bigger window. And clearly Rose's window is about double the size of Alexandra's. Number 3 is the tool shed. Number 4, 5, 6, and 7 are different points in the yard and are simply labeled Rose. You don't see Rose, you just see the points in the yard. And then we go back to number 2, which is now labeled Alexandra's room with the bigger window. And so you can infer from that what happened. And immediately, like, this is both darkly funny And it's such a simple story. And I just went, oh my goodness, I need more by John Klassen. And shockingly, he does mostly children's books, just so you know, they are not all this dark. But many of them are odd. Some of them have a little bit of a dark spin. Try I Want My Hat Back, 2 thumbs up. But this is John Klassen. And so he released The Skull this summer, which is, I want to say, I don't have the book here, but it's maybe 60 to 70 pages. And it's all about a young girl named Attila, who we start the book and she is running through the forest. We never learn why she's running through the forest, but she is running and she is running and she is running. And then she ends up at this mansion with a skull at the gate. And the language is just so spare. The skull moved himself a little so he could see better. Hello, he said again. Hello, said Attila. My name is Attila. I ran away and I need a place to hide and rest. The skull was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I will come down and let you in, but only if you promise to carry me once I do. I am just a skull, and rolling around is difficult for me. Attila was quiet for a moment. And then she said, all right. And the story continues from there as Attila and the skull begin to spend some time together. And each of these scenes, the language and the dialogue is the same. It's a very simple story. Attila and the skull spend time together. And at night, the skull tells Attila that he doesn't want to sleep alone because he's scared. What could possibly scare a skull? And in the story, you find out, and I don't want to give it all away. It is a very quick read. Like, you can probably read this in probably 30 minutes. It's so well done, but it is a weird little book. But it is also a hopeful book. So if you're looking at that first story that I told you John Klassen told, it's a hopeful book. It doesn't end in that dark of a way because it is intended for middle grade kids. But I just love his art. You know, if Kristen was here, who is an art person and also one of our substitute librarians, she would be able to explain why this is so appealing and what it is about his art that manages to be both humorous and thoughtful at the same time. And I just love it. There's art on every page. There's only a couple paragraphs, just like the one page that you saw. And you want to know what is scaring that skull. So pick it up, The Skull, John Klassen. Really anything by John Klassen is going to be interesting. So try this out.
I was first introduced to John Klassen from Story Times with Jennifer at the Dundee branch with I Want My Hat Back. And I have read those to hundreds and hundreds of children because they're serious, they're funny, and like you said, the illustrations are worth it just to see them.
They just are there, and particularly his eyes. There's something about the eyes where the eyes just, if they look in a certain direction, you're like, oh, something's happening. So John Klassen, The Skull, pick it up. It's his most recent work. My other one is probably more of a typical read for me. It is not what I would call a horror read because there isn't a supernatural element. It's more of a thriller. But it is Games for Dead Girls. I also listened to this on Hoopla, so it is out there if you want to listen. Oh, it might be Libby. Is it Libby or Hoopla? It's Hoopla. So if you're interested in listening to this one, it's out there on Hoopla whenever you want to listen to it. And this finds a lot of different elements to it. So we start off with Sarah, who has come to the coast in the little town of Hythe Church, England. And she's come to the coast in the dead of winter, which is not typically when you go to the coast of England. If you're going to the coast, usually you want a nice summer vacation. So we don't know why she's there at this weird time. The other thing that's odd about it is about 4 or 5 months earlier during the summer season, a young woman we don't know what happened to her. She disappeared. She's 14 or 15 years old. She disappears. Nobody knows what's happened. They're still searching for her, sort of, but in that search where it's like, it's been 4 or 5 months. We don't have any leads. We don't know where to search anymore. So that's happening in the little town when Sarah comes. And then we start to learn a little bit more about Sarah and Sarah's secrets. And we discover that Sarah used to come to the same caravan park on the coast in Hythe Church when she was a child. And that when she was there one summer, she made a strong, fast friendship with another girl that was there. And they're about in that 10 to 12-year-old age range where sometimes your friendships are really intense. And these two girls bonded over the folktale of Stitch Face Sue. And right there, Stitch Face Sue is an awesome name for a character in a folktale. I'm not going to tell you the whole folktale, but they bonded. And then Sarah knows something terrible happened at the end of that summer. She doesn't remember exactly what happened, but it has affected the rest of her life. And so the story, it doesn't alternate at all from Sarah's point of view, but it comes through as she shares her different memories and secrets and how she's been living her life for the last 20, 25 years. And then the two stories about the missing girl and what happened to Sarah in her past do come together. I will say it's not necessarily a twisty novel. If you're looking for that in a thriller, for me, it felt like, oh, I pretty much know where this is going, but I don't really want it to go there. So you're sort of dreading it and you're just wondering how it's all going to come out and who's going to make it through relatively unscathed. So if you like folk, and I don't want to call it horror because again, there isn't supernatural, but if you like folk tales and folk horror, you definitely get some of that with the story of Stitch Face Sue. And then if you're also curious about, you just like killer novels, there's clearly something going on with these young women who are going missing. So Games for Dead Girls, it was a really good listen.
Hoopla recommended it for me too. Hoopla because Hoopla's in my head, and so I listened to it. And yes, I would call it haunting, like the way you're saying. You don't want to say horror, you don't want to say. So it was very haunting, and Hoopla's in my head, and they told me to listen to that too. So I do what Hoopla says.
So we must be on the same list for here's another weird and horrifying story you should try. If you like that one, try this one. So that's good to know. All right, so those are our reads that we've been enjoying for this month. Thank you to all of you for sharing what you've been reading, and thank you to those of you who listen, and we'll be back in November. Thanks. Bye.